Good afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate you joining today. Welcome to the UI UX review sessions with Matt Atala. He's from Step Labs, and this event is designed to provide attendees with best practices for structuring UI and UX, and actionable tips, insights, and advice for improving design and development workflows. Before I turn it over to Matt, I'd just like to quickly introduce Replo. Replo is a visual web development platform that allows teams to create beautiful, high-performance pages on Shopify without the need for developers. Replo is light years ahead of other page builders when it comes to customization and page speed, and we have a library of hundreds of proven landing page templates that anyone can use, as well as certified experts who can help you build custom pages in just a few days. We would like to thank Matt and Step Labs for hosting this event and for providing his expertise. And so without further ado, let's dive into the world of UI and UX and discover how to unlock its true potential. Thanks, Matt.
Amazing. Thank you guys for having me. I really hope that these sessions can deliver a lot of value. I can head straight into talking about some tools that we find really useful at Step Labs that we use with our clients. And I hope that some of these are valuable for anyone who has decision-making capacity for design when they're working for their own company or with an agency. So one tool that we found incredibly helpful recently is called Tools.Design. Now, I'm sure as you are all aware, if you've ever designed or developed a website, the world of tools is crazy deep. There are hundreds, if not thousands of tools for every kind of niche thing. And sometimes some of the worst tools are the most SEO optimized, which makes it really difficult to find exactly what you need. Tools.Design has been incredibly helpful for us in terms of kind of keeping up to date with what the best tools in the space actually are for the respective function we require them for. So, for example, it categorizes all of the tools in the design ecosystem by inspiration websites, illustration tools and illustration kits, icons, mockups and kits, typography tools. And so, for example, if you wanted to add some custom illustration site, it would be as simple as hop into Tools.Design. Instead of kind of going through, you could go through the Figma community files, and I'll kind of take you through that approach as well. But I find this is a really, really valuable way for finding like open source illustration libraries that you can then look through and see if you can find like illustration kits that are useful for the respective use case that you're using them for. Some of these tools are free. Some of them are with a freemium plan, and others are completely paid. So, you know, you can really dig around, but this saves a huge amount of time, even just for illustrations. But another use case, of course, would be, you know, potentially for learning. So I know that a lot of e-com businesses might not necessarily, especially if you're starting out, you might not have the budget to work with an agency from the start. So you might actually be designing a site yourself, even though that's not the that's not the industry that you came from before you decided to be a founder. So a really valuable way of kind of getting past that curve is either to upskill yourself or to upskill the member of your team that's responsible for these respective kind of decisions. And a few tools that are incredibly valuable are also to be found in Tools.Design. One that we find incredibly helpful is checklist design. So something that a lot of people struggle with when designing into this is kind of moving UI design and UX away from being a domain of art and the humanities into more of a science where you can kind of consistently replicate good design. And while there is a degree to which you do need a lot of experience, sometimes this can be offset by following like best practices in terms of checklists. So for example, when you come into checklist.design, it distributes a series of checklists based on what you're trying to achieve. So for example, if you wanted to review your buttons, you would go to like the button element checklist, and you can review basically whether your core buttons are fulfilling the criteria that they dictate here. So you can see how it's so easy to miss certain things. For example, when was the last time that you kind of really looked at why you're making certain decisions with the hover states for your buttons? Is that intentional? Is that in line with brand guidelines? What are the choices being made there? When we're thinking about making UI decisions, we always want to be thinking in terms of logic, purpose, and reason. it's my philosophy personally that, and of course you need a significant amount of time in order to execute on this, but you really want to get to a position where if someone asks you why you made a certain decision with regards to an element choice, with regards to a color choice, with regards to font pairings, there's rationale behind that. And while that rationale can be subjective, I do think that it's very important that there is some thought process going into these kind of decisions. And you know, the beautiful thing about UI design is that with a few small tweaks and guidance, you can actually have a really substantial impact on the quality of your design and subsequently the conversion rate that your brand receives. The beautiful thing in e-com is that there's a direct relationship between high quality UX and an increase in revenue, which isn't actually true when you're working on, let's say, a site for an agency, because there's more significant variables that come into that process. Of course, design is very significant in terms of deciding whether or not a client wants to sign with you, but it's far more significant when you're considering that your physical storefront is your website. So, of course, there's the link. I'm going to put it in the chat as well. But that's one really valuable tool that we use. You know, if I could kind of show you another one that on the topic of upskilling yourselves, I don't know if anyone in the chat, what kind of size teams are you working with? If anyone wants to just kind of unmute and mention kind of the size of teams, whether it's just you or a few people in the team.
I can speak in on so currently my team is 3. Me being kind of like lead on all design initiatives, not just for UX UI design, but really full product design, sprint design, and every kind of design that our client, where I kind of lead on that and oversee the outputs. But I have a junior UI design talent, and then a senior UX talent. So I kind of work with that, and then on the things that need a little more finesse in the design department, I step in on some of those projects. So like our junior will come in and do a lot of like the basic layouts and just get copy in place, get everything basically mapped out and laid out, and then I'll come in and add kind of finishing touches and polish as we get ready to deliver.
Fantastic. And what's your kind of continuous design cadence? How often are you redesigning? Do you opt for like a big website redesign every 6 months, or is it continual updates? Be fascinated to
know. Good question. Yeah, that usually doesn't go over very well with clients. A lot of times when we come in, we're redesigning their site based off of something that was poorly done or didn't have any kind of strategy behind it, and so we're coming in doing a full strategic marketing plan and revamping other things, and one of those things being their website and how it's used to drive revenue. So usually 6 months down the line, there isn't any kind of like serious revamp. It's more iterative A/B testing on smaller changes to see where those changes might be increasing conversions and things like that. So it's not huge changes 6 months down the line. It's usually more, like I said, like more consistent, iterative, smaller changes.
Yeah, I'd love to open a conversation as well, because of course Nicole and Daniel are both founders. So I'd love to open a conversation around how founders can work best with agencies. Because I'm not sure if Daniel or Nicole, what kind of stages you are both at. But of course, there's a difference between founders who are kind of at the stage of designing and developing their own website. Usually the next step is working with an agency throughout that process. So yeah, I would really love to know from your perspective, Arturo, what do you think makes a fantastic client agency combination when working on an e-commerce site?
And again, what do you think makes a good client agency relationship where?
When designing and developing an e-commerce site.
So I think it really just comes down to education. A lot of times clients come in with an e-commerce website or a product brand, and they don't really have a lot of the metrics that they should be tracking to drive change or to inform change. And so I think just having if you're asking like what makes a good client relationship, it's just having clients that are open to being educated, who are open to realizing that they may not know everything, and trusting you. So building trust in the beginning so that they're receptive to your direction, your advice, and your education, right? Because at the end of the day, the more that they know about what drives revenue for their business, again, a lot of times they don't know. They don't even know what their, they don't know what their customer acquisition cost is or what the lifetime value of their customers are. Like some of these things are maybe outside of design, but very important, and they drive a lot of the decisions we make in design. And so education and being open to education is a huge thing that we start with. So if we have clients in the beginning where we're in the sales process, we're already seeing there's a lot of pushback, there's a lot of like I guess a lot of times people have been in business for a long time, they don't want to be told something from younger people or potentially people that could be it's hard. And so we see those as red flags and kind of try to get them on our side. And if they don't want to adjust or they want to put up a lot of boundaries, then we just typically don't move forward with those type of clients.
Yeah, and I think that's really critical at the end, which is when you're deciding to work with someone else, someone external, you can't rush into that relationship choice. I find that a lot of, and this is particularly really important in e-commerce, when you're deciding which agency you want to work with in order to build your site out, that is almost as important a decision as who you're hiring internally. And maybe that's not true if you ran like a law firm and you just needed to put out a website where you have a form, but this is your store. This is where in some cases 100% of your revenue comes from. So you need to get that decision right, and you need to make sure that you are vetting your agencies and you're interviewing them in the same depth and detail that you would be vetting a potential employee. Because even though the sum might be significantly lower for the contract, it's really important that you get that decision right. Because if you build a great relationship there, it saves a lot of headache later down the line. And we've seen a lot of kind of e-commerce brands really burn a lot of money from not doing that sort of due diligence, and actually just ensuring that the person they're working with, they have a good relationship with and they feel comfortable with. Because a great point that you mentioned, Arturo, is that when we're building and when we're working with clients on the agency end, we are also consultant. So we have obviously we would be expected to have the expertise to execute on what we're doing, but at the same time, we have to educate on why we're making certain decisions. So this really comes back to the point that I mentioned earlier when I was going through 1,000 design tools, which is you always want to be able to explain your decision making in the design process, not just so that the client trusts you, but if you're designing and developing the website yourself, so that you can trust yourself, you need to be able to trust that the decisions you're making on your site aren't random and speculative, but informed by form of process. So yeah, I think that's really helpful. Nicole, Daniel, are there any questions or queries that you think I could help with at the moment in terms of any UI or UX related issues that you might be facing at the moment? Would love to help. If not, then I'll bounce back straight to what I was going through earlier, which was UX CEL. So I think this would actually be really, really helpful for anyone who is working with someone in their team that perhaps isn't as upskilled as they would like to be in terms of design, but might potentially be able to get there with a bit of education. So this is a really powerful online platform for upskilling yourself in terms of UX and UI. So UX CEL has a series of courses that are very gamified, which put out this kind of sort of web where you can track your results, how many assessments you've done, and you can also gain certificates. So you can actually upskill like the junior members of your team so that you're helping them develop professionally in their career also. This is a tool that covers granular stuff like the ins and outs of typography, so the ins and outs of color theory, which a lot of people don't really think about, but is really important. But the thing I like the most about UXCL is that they actually have tests where you can rank yourself in accordance with how well you perform on UX writing, accessibility, user testing, quantitative research skills, typography. And I really think that a few hours invested into this a week, if you're responsible for your company's website, is never going to detriment your growth. And for a reasonable price of as little as £6 a month to access their full content library. I personally think it's an no-brainer. Whenever we bring on a junior designer or a junior developer, this is one of the first tools that we actually implement into their education plan so that they can progress. And that's something that I feel really, really quite confident about. Is there anything specifically that anyone else would want to discuss? Any moments, any questions or queries that you're facing with clients at the moment, Arturo, that I can assist with?
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So right now, as I mentioned earlier, we're a bit more early stage. So day to day, it's just me, kind of working on everything, from business operations to designing the website. So my question is, what do you think are the most important skills to be focusing on as far as UI and UX design? When I have other stuff going on as well.
So I think the first thing I would say is if you've got a whole bunch going on, you want to make the probability of making kind of poor decisions as low as possible. And this is something that Replo UI is going to massively help with. So Replo UI are basically putting out a Figma kit, which is going to have the largest number of e-commerce related components available. I think it's going to be the largest kit of its kind in the world. But in the meantime, if you go onto Figma's community files, and I'll show you how to do this now, you can actually head to Explore Community, and you can search the community for e-commerce kit. And you can find like these different UI elements, which should have like nav bars. So you just get a copy here, which should have nav bars, footers, product sections, product display pages, and this should make it a bit simpler for you to go through the decision. So this is actually quite a bad kit, but I'll show you the one that I think is the most powerful in the world, and that I really hope is coming to Replo. So this is a really powerful kit for Webflow. So here you can basically copy a component, so navbar 3, for example, and you can actually paste that into your frame for your design and start to actually build out like the core functionality of your interface without needing to know a huge amount about design. And from here, you can, just detach instance if you're not really comfortable, and that can be a lot easier for you to play around, or you can remove auto layout so that you can kind of manipulate elements within these components, and start to add your own colors, your own gradients, your own buttons. But I think as a first step, that's really powerful if you're not if you're not investing like your 24/7 into learning design. If that's not reasonable, then starting out with UI kits is a really powerful way to get through that curve.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one. I've used it a lot, Matthew, so I'm glad you shared that library. It's actually a big part of our workflow. We use it exclusively for every website we build is always started off with that particular UI kit. So the full version, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, 100%. The guys at Reloom are amazing, and Reloom, I hope it's coming to Replo. There may be something in the works there. So yeah, I definitely think that using UI kits is helpful. I think beyond that, doing a little bit of research on the font pairing that you want to choose for your whole website is really powerful. You want there to be a decision as to why you're pairing a sans serif font with a serif font, or if you're using one font family like Roboto, playing around with the weights, playing around with kind of how you're using like bold styles of like that typeface versus where you're using italic styles of that typeface. These kind of decisions will form kind of the basis of how your design is perceived, because really design at its core, especially with regards to UI, boils down to a few key decisions. And if you can get typography right and the color and kind of the colors using, I think you're in a really strong position. From there, I mean, what other fundamental skills do you think are important if you had minimal time and you were relearning Arturo?
Honestly, wireframing, because really that's where it all kind of starts. Just I like to focus a lot on the UX phase and making sure that the research is done properly and thoroughly. That there's a lot of effort put into just very basic layouts and why you go with those instead of really focusing on colors, fonts, and all of the color that you add to things. That stuff is great, but I think what really drives conversions when it comes to businesses that you're trying to help make more money or convert a certain user for whatever the reason. I think the research and the thinking behind why you design something a certain way is more important. So the base wireframes are huge, and so that's why I like Reloom, because it lets us kind of take all the color away, all the fonts away, and then of course you want to then add all the prettiness to it, right? Make it look beautiful, make it delightful to the user, but understanding why a button should be in a certain place, or why why you might want a gallery of images or creative images. I don't know, like it's just those little decisions kind of come in, they kind of distract designers. And so if you can think about that and get it off the designer's plate, then the designer can really just like add their flair and make it look beautiful. So I try to focus again more on the UX initially. So yeah, that's why I have a senior UX with me instead of like a junior UX. I think I can make anything look beautiful, but the thinking behind it is way more powerful and more drives more of the bottom line for our customers. So
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think UX obviously has to come first, but and to be honest with you, you can actually convert with poor UI and great UX. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever seen those landing pages that ClickFunnels put out, but ClickFunnels landing pages are the ugliest things you've ever seen in the world, but they actually convert really well because the messaging is on point. Now, would they convert better with cleaner, more premium UI? Certainly. And I think this is where your selling is really important. Being able to tell your brand story. You can tell your brand story to some degree through UX. You're going to be more likely to do that through your UI elements. And this is where I think a lot of e-commerce brands really let themselves down, which is over investing into imagery, where they've spent thousands, potentially even 5 figures on amazing photo shoots, amazing product shots, and then not investing anything into like the hero sections, the feature sections, and the design and structure of the pages that are housing those images. And I see this a lot where, they'll even bring in like 3D models for their images, but then they'll say, we need to get the website done in 3 days. We haven't got any time for that. And I think understanding really as an e-commerce founder that your website, if you're not doing wholesale, is driving 100% of your revenue, and thus it deserves proportionate attention to the amount of revenue that is bringing in for you is a really important staple to understand. I think also one thing that I've noticed when working with e-commerce founders is, and I'd love to get anyone's thoughts on this, is working on your website is often considered a one and done job. It's considered something that's really long, tiring, painful to write the copy. We want to put in a big shift on this and then just not look at it for 2 years and hope it brings money in. And really that's a really detrimental mindset, because when you're developing a product, the likelihood of you nailing that product on its first variation, the first time that you send it off to the factory and you get it back, very, very low. So the probability that you're going to absolutely nail the tone, the messaging, the UI and the UX to optimize it for conversion on your first attempt is actually really low. So I actually think that a trend which is going to be more productive and actually significantly more cost effective for e-commerce founders going forwards when they're working with outsourced designers or developers is going to be getting those designers and developers to work with them on a retainer basis for a period of like 6 months or a year, and paying less paying less upfront and splitting those payments across months so that that person is actually embedded into your team and almost becomes your tech department and your design department. I think that this makes a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. Firstly, it reduces your cost because you're spreading that payment over a longer period of time. Secondly, the agency or the freelancer will probably love it because the most stressful thing being a small agency owner or being a freelancer is 1 month you can smash it cash flow wise, and the next month you can get destroyed and not make any money. So having some sort of recurring cash flow with your clients is a real win for them as well. Thirdly, they'll get more and more invested in your brand as they build a better relationship with you, which means that your professional kind of workflow is going to get more and more optimized. They're going to understand your brand better. You're going to need to hop on less calls with them to make decisions. And I think that the quality of the work should be expected to be significantly better than if they were just hopping in for 3 weeks. Do you find, Arturo, do you find that clients are receptive to this approach, Arturo?
Well, I mean, we sell one-off and we sell retainer clients, and we aim for always selling retainer clients, meaning 3, 6, or 12-month engagements. But I will say that in order to do that, it has to be part of a bigger go-to-market strategy. It has to include, different marketing channels that they want to drive traffic from or reach out to their potential customers through. It isn't just the web portion. So there's a lot more to it. It includes work on their branding. It includes, so I guess, yes, clients are receptive to it as long as you can bring that overall plan to them and you can go with a strategy that touches on every part of their business and then ties that whole strategy back to say like, hey, we're going to do XYZ with your web presence because it's going to, drive these metrics, which are your, key performance indicators up, right? It's going to drive traffic, it's going to drive revenue, it's going to build your brand your brand awareness. Like there's a lot of other pieces, but yes, typically retainer clients or retainers are understood best when presented as full scope of service versus just we do web design and development, right? Like that's just one piece of it.
Yeah, for sure. Although it's a difficult one, and I empathize with ecom founders because, as Daniel said earlier, you're having to hold so many different hats that you can also get into a danger of just hiring. You don't want to interview 15 marketing agencies or 15 web design agencies, and that's where that's where you can kind of get burnt. I mean, I'm sure everyone who's spent any time in ecom knows a brand that has been destroyed by they're basically investing in a marketing agency who were saying that they were putting like 5K a month into paid ads, and they didn't really see a return. So I think just doing that due diligence there, you've got to be careful.
It's very common, actually. We hear that a lot. Like, oh, I spent this much on ads and we broke even, or we lost money, or we didn't, they didn't track the data properly, so there was no way to like do anything with those ads we ran. It was just a wasted effort. And I think the big thing is that like clients don't understand typically that ads are really the last piece of the puzzle. Like you don't want to run ads before you've done all of the other work that comes before that. You really have to have a strong message, a strong brand. You have to be present on all the different channels. Like you have to have your ducks in a row before you start throwing money into that. And then you also have to track all of that, which requires a lot of systems that need to be implemented to do so. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I'd love to ask Nicole and Daniel about, which is what does your kind of analytics stack look like at the moment? And are you using some sort of are you potentially using heat mapping software to actually look at like how people are engaging with your site to inform design decisions, or is that something you'd like me to talk about? I'd love to know.
Right now, we don't use any heat mapping thing like that, but I have been looking into that, so I would be interested in you talking about using those a bit more.
Yeah, so I think that's a really common situation that founders are in, where you spend a lot of time and energy basically designing and developing the site in accordance with what you think is as good as it could possibly be, but without those analytics it's really challenging. So my number one tip always there is to get on Hotjar, Hotjar, get on their free plan. It's really easy to sync Hotjar with Replo, and I know that actually the Replo team use Hotjar internally for their application as well. But you can then basically get videos whenever someone's on your site, which shows where their cursor is interacting and what they're clicking on, what they're spending time reading. And this is fascinating because if you watch some of these sessions, you get so much, you get such a deeper understanding as to what drives a purchase versus just looking at Shopify's kind of basic analytics, where they tell you how many people got added to cart, how many people checked out, and how many people didn't. That doesn't tell you how long they spent reading one of your blogs on a specific topic, for example. And it can really help to inform decisions. One example of this would be, let's say that you had an FAQ section at the bottom and you noticed consistently that customers were always asking, you know, they were always clicking on one specific question. That would indicate that potentially you need to over index on how much you're highlighting that in earlier sections of the website's copy. So maybe you add that FAQ answer to an earlier feature section, or maybe if it's important enough, the hero section. Maybe it becomes a core part of your value proposition. So that would be my number one tip, and it's free. So there's really no harm.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely. I've heard about Hotjar before, just haven't had a chance to implement it, but I'm gonna take a look at that.
Yeah, I think Shopify's quantitative analytics are quite good. But I've always found that if you're at a really early stage, to just validate your assumptions, Hotjar, it just gives sneaky data that you shouldn't really be able to access, but you know you can. And I think it's a real value add. Just make sure that you add their clause to your privacy policy on Shopify, because I know a lot of people miss out that step.
Okay, thank you for that.
No worries. Nicole, is there anything you guys are struggling with at the moment or curious about that you think we could potentially help with today?
Yeah, so we just started using Replo, and so our first landing page, we took inspiration from some of the templates that were there, and it ended up being a number of templates put together. So I don't know if you would be interested in providing some feedback. We haven't officially launched it yet, but we're going to be using it for an unseen landing page, driving traffic through some publishers and affiliates.
100%. That I would love to provide feedback on that. Do you want to share your screen?
I can put it in the chat if you like.
Sure, and then I'll share my screen. That's cool. Amazing. Thanks so much. Sweet. Cool. So this is, I mean, you know what, I mean, the hero section heading, the H1, is definitely going to attract a lot of people. I assume that will convert quite well. So you've definitely nailed it there. I mean, one super easy tip that I always give people with regards then, Artur, I'm sure you kind of do this as well. Whenever you have body text, and you've done this really well already, whenever you have body text, it's so good to have like a typographic hierarchy, but also like a visual hierarchy. So I love the way that you've kind of grayed out portions of this text in order to emphasize the elements that are actually most significant. Something that I think would be potentially even better is to kind of have consistency throughout like this heading paragraph and throughout all the copy. So here we have like all caps lock. Here we have bold, but we have standard case. And then here we have all caps lock kind of again. I'm sure like Thrive with Active is, that makes sense if it's a separate part of the brand, but trying to aim for consistency throughout both like copy and all like UI elements is really quite significant. But
Okay.
I think that this is, in general, the copy and the messaging is great. I think potentially you could play around with the layout here. So you might, for example, have try and add 4 of these and have like a kind of 2-column layout, and see if we can maybe have like a green sort of like hover effect on the top, maybe a Lottie animation, so that we're drawing people's attention even further to the benefits. Those would be great. Also, potentially, you might want to just kind of stick with the tick route, and then just add these 3 benefits as well to like the tick system, so that you don't have 2 ways of displaying like the best features that are kind of competing with each other visually.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
question. A lot of the examples were more of the tick mark, easy to read, but we were considering the graphic approach as well. But yeah, I like the
yeah,
idea of
yeah.
streamlining it.
I would always lean into the graphic approach, and I would try and I love iconography personally, so seeing like trying to kind of check out some great examples of how people have used icons and some great websites to kind of get inspiration on this, like godly.website or awards. And then if you just search e-commerce, you can find a series of like award-winning websites. But looking at how they integrate like their branding with their icons. So here you can see, for example, all of the icons themselves have a fill color of green. And they've got like these kind of like custom illustrations which show 12 in a box or one bottle on its own. And honestly, like that's not expensive to hire for. Like if you were to get a graphic designer to just produce 20 or so like custom illustrations for your brand, you know, if you get the right person, it won't be world class, but you can get something decent that improves like your brand image for less than maybe $100, maybe $100 to $200, and then just improve over time. But yeah, that's a huge one that I would give. I think that I would always try and have the CTA above the fold. So I don't know how you would rework. You would need to rework the layout, but you would want to have this shop libido a bit higher up the page so that that's visually represented, and potentially also swap this image to the right hand side and have the text on the left, because you know obviously we focus on reading left, so my eye would probably be first drawn to the image, and then second, well, to be honest, in this instance my eye was probably drawn to the word sex because it's quite a good word to have in a heading. It grabs people's attention. But in other instances, I would usually recommend having like the image on the right hand side so that you're focusing in on the value proposition and then the image to back up the value proposition. I love this banner. You know, even just kind of cool things like potentially you could play with the angle of this banner. So you have it at a 45-degree angle with another banner at the opposite 45-degree angle, so that they're like working together. That would be cool. Potentially also using your brand colors in here, maybe wrap these in a button so that you can have like an icon showing less stress, showing more vitality, showing better sex. I don't know how you would display that in an icon whilst keeping it PG, but that would be certainly a challenge. I think here again we can come back to consistency with typography. So the way that typography was represented here, I think this is a different. This is certainly a different. It's a different. I think it might even be a different font weight. Yeah, it's a different font weight, and different font sizing compared to the paragraph above. So little things like that, you've got to try and find consistency, and it's crazy. I'm sure Uro can say as well. Those like 1% gains, they seriously add up.
Yeah, I think the thinking there was, I think that's a medium weight, was just because of reverse type and the readability on smaller devices. But
yeah, I think you can definitely play around with that. I mean, that's certainly a small thing. I would probably lean. I would gray this out a little bit so it's not exactly the same color as this, like maybe FFF and then 80%. Potentially keep it. I would probably keep this at a like a medium lightweight, and then just emphasize the keyword like daily dose or sexual arousal and function, or enhances sexual arousal. One thing that I've been kind of doing on sites recently, in order to lean into further consistency, is whenever I'm kind of using like logos, I found that it was really annoying me that I would have like really slick brand guidelines where, for example, the colors are orange and green, but then with the logos, they're always different colors, right? Because it's not, you're not in control of El Gourmet's logo or Well Monthly, but they don't fit with your brand visuals. So one way that you can really get around this is you head into Figma and you download this plugin, which is called Grayscale. This plugin, basically, you can highlight like color logos like this, and it can actually make them all into like the same shade of gray, which looks really quite clean in my opinion. So that plugin is definitely one that I think is pretty useful, and of course doesn't cost any money. Then I guess coming into here, you know, you'd probably want to look at like alignment. So align this to the left hand side. I'd probably get rid of the bullet points in favor of an icon. Not sure what your thoughts are would be there, but I'd probably go for that. And then I would love it if this image was like animated in. That would be super cool. And I love the way that you're playing with the layout here, so that this is feeding the next section, and perhaps even kind of, yeah, you've done that consistently, so that's really nice. But yeah, I think in general, the messaging on this site is really, really clean, and again, the product imagery is really good. So with just like these kind of like 1 or 2% tweaks, I think that you would see a substantial increase in conversion rate. Like with icons here, what I would probably look to do is wrap this icon in like an orange. I might even be able to show you quite quickly. So I use Iconify as my like icon library of choice. So what was the icon? The icon was like water with, yeah, okay, cool, I found it. So one thing that you could potentially do is see if we can wrap this icon and make it look significantly. So if I just type in orange, then we go like 50%, and then we go 32 radius or 40. And then we might even want to play with these colors ourselves. Keep this. There's just a lot you can do in order to kind of just make things just have a little bit more kind of personality, because the product has a huge amount of personality. And so I guess replicating that with the icons and the graphics will be powerful as well. And you know, you can find like Lottie files, these are like animations, which might add some value as well. But huge fan of the messaging. And I like the fact that you've got pictures of people in the reviews. One thing that decreases conversion quite significantly is when people just have a text review, but there's no evidence that it's an actual person. I don't know if you've seen this before. But yeah, in general, I think this is really close to being a super high converting landing page. And with just a little bit more time spent on the graphics, I think you'll be in a really, really strong position here, because product's great, messaging is great. You know, one other thing I might add is I might even move like this bundle and save section a bit higher up, maybe just below the I'm not sure, you could probably A/B test that. But I get
that was a question, just, you know, based on taking different sections and putting them together, like how far up, if someone hadn't, you know, been or wasn't familiar with our brand, how far up do you want to put that offer?
I think to some degree it depends on how powerful the hero section is, but I think that this is a really strong hero section from a messaging point of view and from a copy point of view. So I understand why you've done it, which is you're telling a story where, you know, they see the product, they see the value proposition, then you're detailing the features in more depth, and then you're showing them how to purchase. So from a storytelling point of view, I do think it's good. But it would be, that's just the sort of thing you want to A/B test. One thing that I defo just noticed is you probably want to have like some sort of timed change between these images, as opposed to the user having to click to change them.
Okay.
Because when you just first come onto the page, you can't see that these arrows, and that's why I actually missed it. But it would be good if you had like, and actually this is where what me and Arturo were talking about a while back. The Reloom library has a header component, I think, with tabs, if I'm right. Arturo, do you know the one I mean?
With tabs, there's a few. Let's see.
Yeah, here.
Is it
So
is it one with like 4 sections? Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
So-
a
so
newer
you can-
one.
Yeah, so you can have like tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, tab 4, similar to what you have, as replacing the slider. And I think that would be super slick. As well as also like, don't feel afraid to just play around with the image. So can I drag this out? Let me see if I can save this image. Cool.
I would even suggest having the image front center as the first one,
Yeah. If we just drag
or
this
the
in,
product rather.
yeah, that's definitely possible. That would definitely be cool. One thing as well, like sometimes I do, is I sometimes just play around with, what does this look like without a background? And you can do that super quick in Figma with just the remove.bg plugin. So imagine you had kind of custom illustrations, and you could then like have UI elements, like, I don't know, we could have like a star, if you wanted. Sorry, I'm just trapped. Have like the one thing that is driving me crazy about Figma, and I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this, is that I can't like scroll to zoom anymore. I have to use like Command minus plus. It's like a bug, and it makes it so difficult when you're working in like huge file sizes. But if I
You
just,
could hold Command and just drag on your mouse.
yeah, but I miss being able to just use the like scroll in. Got comfortable with that. But yeah, you can really kind of like, if you were to get those illustrations, or like use an illustration kit like from 1,000 design tools, you could start to, in theory, like play around with some of the designs around here and see if you can do some cool stuff, add some graphics, and you know, potentially add some style and kind of brand messaging to your to your product imagery as well. But I do think in general it's pretty good image. Are there any other questions on that? Or
No,
queries?
that's great. I appreciate the feedback.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any designs that they want to kind of discuss, get feedback
I
on?
wanted to add just one point of feedback. I think you guys mentioned there was a question on the order of things on the site, for visitors who maybe don't know the brand very well. For e-commerce, I would, just from experience, we've found that typically you need to treat everyone that visits your e-com website as if they've never seen the brand. So you do want to do a little bit of education, but it's also important to elevate the products a little more. So those ones with the bundles at the bottom might be better, a little higher. They might convert a little better higher from what I've seen in the past. But again, it's an A/B testing type of situation. We want to just try both layouts and see what does better, and track it so that you can actually tie it back to which one's selling. But yeah, that would be my 2 cents on just how you might position your mindset as far as like new customers have never seen the brand maybe, so like just give a little bit of detail, a little bit of benefit, but still want to keep that like bestsellers or bundles or those like that key product grouping that you want to promote the most. Keep it a little higher. Tends to do better. So
Yeah, that's an awesome tip. It's really, you really just want to get to a point where you can kind of put high quality designer at speed, which is where having like a design system really helps. But that is also an investment which requires like a product to be at a certain size. But that is where obviously you would, well, I say obviously, maybe not everyone knows. So you basically have like your components laid out for buttons, icons, rules for typography, which means that when you like spin out a new landing page, already like in-depth guidelines as to how those components should be used and in what format, guidelines on imagery. All of these kind of things allow you to test one page versus another super quick, and see what engages people better. And that's where Hotjar will be super valuable as well. But yeah, I think we're coming to the close of this first UI UX review session. So thank you guys for all coming. I personally really enjoyed sharing some tools that we use, and kind of the Q&A section, as well as going through some designs at the end. That was great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt, and thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed this session, and yeah, we're going to be hosting these on a weekly basis moving forward. So every Tuesday, same time. We have one set up next week, and you can reserve your spot at lu.ma/Replo.
And yeah,
Thanks,
I mean,
everybody.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat here.
And just because we're starting out, like if you have anything that you're working on in the week, you will get good attention and time with these sessions early on. Like we hope to kind of have more people in future, but we really want to deliver significant value kind of for free to help you guys out.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.